Alrighty, a very good day to all my friends who've joined in from around the world. This session is specially dedicated to all my Toastmaster friends who've getting ready to compete this year at the World Championship of Public Speaking. But it'll also be beneficial to any aspiring speaker that's trying to make their way to becoming a better speaker in their respective fields. So winning the World Championship of Public Speaking is a life-changing event. There is a lot of techniques, a lot of tips, and a lot of strategies that you need to follow in order to win this title. It's changed my life in ways that I could never imagine. And I'm sure with a little bit of preparation, with a little bit of practice, it could change your life too. So this session is all about asking those questions, all important questions that you have in your mind that would help you not only win your club contest, but your area, your division, and your district, and finally, hopefully, the World Championship this year in Las Vegas 2015. So the first question coming in is from Arun from India. And Arun is asking me whether the title or the topic that you pick is important for contests. Now, let me talk a little bit about picking the right title for your speech. A lot of us make this mistake. We pick a topic or a title that's interesting to us and something that we are confident in speaking about. Now, this is good. There's nothing wrong with that. But you also have to ask whether this would be interesting to your audience. Sometimes what's interesting to us may not really be interesting to the audience that's listening. Now, this is also important for districts, Toastmaster districts that have two countries in one district. Sometimes topics and titles that are interesting in a certain country may not be really interesting when you go beyond your geography and when you join or when you have a contest in a different country. So number one, when you pick your title, when you pick your topic, ask whether this is interesting to the audience. That should be your number one criteria. But it also should be something you are passionate about speaking. So it's about striking that balance in picking your speeches. Now, my advice is in some districts, emotional topics get a little bit more weightage because it's easy to sway an audience with emotion. And in some districts, that it might not work. What I've generally found out, even in my speaking career, is that I come from District 82, which is a part of South Asia. Emotional topics sometimes tend to get a hold of the judges more quickly than as opposed to humorous or any other topic that you have in mind. So my advice for you is look at these factors. What topics would really contribute to a winning speech? Whether the judges and the audience are more prone to emotion, is that something that would work for you? And you need to consider these factors. What I always do is I localize my speech to the geography, to the audience that's there, and my aim is to win a contest. Now, a lot of people actually come and ask me, Dan, do I have to talk about an emotional topic to win a speech contest? And my response to them is yes. Sometimes you have to. Your speech could be a really great speech, but a contest-winning speech is something entirely different. So my advice for you is pick a topic according to the audience, according to the judges in your district, and something that would go in line with the judging criteria. So Arun, that's my response to you in picking topics. Just to summarize, pick a topic that's interesting to the audience, not something that's not interesting to the audience, but something that you like to speak about. So you got to strike that balance. That's very important. All right. Next question coming in is from Mirantha. Now, Mirantha from Sri Lanka is asking, Dananjaya, does your accent matter in a speech? Do people tend to judge you from your accent, especially in Sri Lanka? Well, I think this is a very, very valid concern. Well, what I always say is that you need to be able to have certain techniques and tactics that would really help you relate to the audience, especially when it comes to pronouncing your words. Sometimes how we pronounce certain words in India and Sri Lanka may be very different from how people pronounce it in the West. So this is very important for you to understand and pick and choose the right way to pronounce words depending on where you're doing the contest. As for your accent, I always feel that you got to be accent neutral. And this is something that you need a lot of time to work on. But having your unique identity, having your unique way of speaking can really add to your speech. So if you have a British accent, an American accent, or it can be a Caribbean accent, or it could be even an accent from South Asia, as long as people can understand what you're saying, you have, I would personally say that it won't have a huge impact on how you are judged and how you are perceived. Personally, for me, I've evolved my accent to a level that a more international audience could relate to. So that's something that I've put in a lot of work towards, because I now speak more to a foreign audience than to a local audience. So what I've managed to do is, through a lot of practice, through a lot of hard work, manage to come to an accent that is able to communicate to a different to a wide range of audience. So Miranta, to win a contest, your accent doesn't matter, long as you can communicate to it. If you do have an accent, it can actually be a positive impact in your speech. But make sure that the audience understands what you were saying. That's very important. All right. The questions are strolling in, guys. Hold on. Let me get abreast of all the questions that are coming in. All right, here we go. All right, another question that's coming in. Here we go. Mike from Australia is asking about body language. Do you need to be dramatic on stage to win a speech contest? Well, I think through my speech, I see something. I've managed to disprove this theory that you don't need to have flamboyant body language in order to win a speech contest. Now, I've seen speeches where you have this exuberant body language, where you're rolling on stage, where sometimes you got huge gestures that seems to be overdone. This used to be something even I used to contemplate when I was competing, and I think I managed to realize that I'm not going to do that because it looks unnatural. So my advice to you is, body language is just a component in the judging criteria. You get about 10 marks for body language when it comes to judging. My advice for you, Mike, is that make sure that your body language is meaningful. And what I always say is, I would sometimes imagine a sphere, a 2 to 3 feet sphere around my body. And most of the body language that I do is within this sphere. So it looks really natural. Sometimes when you move out, it doesn't look natural. So for me, in my speaking style, I always try to keep my body language non-invasive. I don't try to reach unnecessarily out to the audience unless I have to. So what I would always say is, you don't need to have exuberant body language. Something that you do need to have is meaningful body language at the right moment. And something that I love to do is use my gestures from my navel area. And sometimes this is called the trust and truth plane of your body. That's the midsection of your body. And I love making gestures, and I consistently try to make gestures from the midsection of my body. It's something that I've been used to doing, and it's a technique that has worked for me throughout my speaking career. So you don't need to have exuberant body language. You don't need to dramatize what you are saying, but you need to have body language for effect. Now, that being said, you need to also take a look. You need to also take a look at the other facets of your speech. Sometimes when your message is so strong, sometimes you might have humor. That's fantastic. Sometimes your message is wonderful. And when you score high on these components, having natural body language will add to that. But sometimes there are occasions when your message is not strong, when sometimes your speech is not that impactful, where body language becomes then more important. So some speakers tend to add more body language when the other components of your speech is not as strong. So have natural body language in your speech. You don't need to overdo it. Body language is just 10 points in the entire criteria. What you need to do is look at the other criteria, your vocal variety, your message, your structuring, and figure out how strong there. When you have those components solid, you can afford to have natural body language. So that's advice that I would like to give Mike. All right. Let me dig out the next question, guys. Here we go. Let me dig out this next question that I'm getting right now. All right, here we go. All right. All right, my good friend, now you guys can send in your questions to me on Twitter. That's at Dananjaya_H. I'm on Twitter. You can send in your Facebook. You can log on with me on Facebook, and you can send in your questions to Facebook as well for whatever the question that you need to ask me. All right, here we go. David from Singapore is asking me a very important question, and the question is, how do I start to write a winning speech? All right, now that's a huge question. That's a big question. All right. A lot of us spend too much of time trying to think about the topic or title we want to talk about. And this is a mistake that I used to do when I started speaking as well. I used to think, what is a topic? What can I talk about this year? What's a theme that I can touch? And sometimes it just doesn't come to your head. Instead, I started with, what do I want my audience to do, feel, or think after they listen to my speech? So when I do my speeches, I always think about, what's my call to action? What do you want? What do I want my audience to do when they finish listening to my speech? So that's where I start from, and I start my speech from my message. In fact, when I write my speech, the last thing I do is put the title. So I never start with the title. I actually put my title at the end of the speech. I start with my message, my call to action. What do I want my audience to think? What do I want my audience to feel? What do I want my audience to do after they finish listening to me? So for example, in the World Championship speech this year, I see something. My call to action was, surround yourself by people that are great. So when you surround yourself with people that are great, you become great. Now, this is the first line of thinking that came into my mind, and that's where I started from. And I built my speech step by step from my message. So start from your message, not from your title. Don't think about a theme. Don't think about the title or a speech topic you want to talk about. Always start with your message. What's your call to action? What do I want my audience to do, think, or feel after I finish my speech? So David from Singapore, that's your question, mate. Let me dig up some more questions. All right, here we go. A lot of questions coming in. Let me see if I can pick some out. All right, here we go. All right, here we go. Charita is asking me, Charita is saying, I'm just starting up. Is it actually possible to get rid of stage fright, or is it just smoke and mirrors? All right, Charita, thank you so much for your question. That's a very important question. Even after 10 years of speaking, I haven't got over my stage fright. I'll tell you why. Because the audience keeps changing. Sometimes when you get comfortable with the audience in your country, you're used to speaking to an audience in your country, and once you become good at speaking, you're invited to different conferences, and then you meet a different audience, and still you get stage fright. Sometimes the expectations are different. And after winning the world championship, not only your workload increases, but the expectations increase as well. So you always have stage fright. It's something that I always have too. But see, stage fright is always good. That nervousness is always good, long as you know how to manage it. Now, managing your stage fright is something that's very important. And how do you manage your stage fright? I normally follow 3 tips. Number 1, talk about something that you're confident that you know about. I say it's the domain. It's what you know. You've studied this topic. You've studied this subject. You're an authority, an expert. You've read books about it. Now, this confidence gives you the extra energy to manage that nervousness, because you know what you're talking about. Number 2, find out whether the audience wants to listen to what you have to say. So, for example, something that you can do is something that I do is I normally send out a small questionnaire, a small a document that a sample audience fills out and says, Dan, this is something I want to talk about. This is something I want to listen to. This is something that's interesting to me, and I want to listen to that. So when I get on stage, not only do I know I have the knowledge to speak about the topic, I also know the audience wants to listen to it. Number 2, understand the right way of rehearsing and practicing your speech. Now, this is something a lot of people get wrong. You cannot master a speech by being in your room and speaking to your mirror or your cat or your dog. It doesn't happen. In a couple of interviews that I did last year, I said I love going to schools and speaking to kids, because their reaction to your speech is honest. They just laugh when they want to laugh. They cry when they want to cry. So what I always do is I get an audience of about 8 to 10-year-olds before I go to a conference. Now I'm going to Germany next week, and I just did the presentation that I wanted to do in Germany to a bunch of school kids. And that allowed me not only to be comfortable with the audience, but it also allowed me to figure out how they're reacting to the audience. Because a good speaker always speaks to the inner child of the audience. So something that you can do is pick an audience that you're really comfortable. It could be a group of school kids. It could be a group of university students, and you're very comfortable speaking to them. It can be even a bunch of friends. And always practice with a group. Don't practice alone. So my second strategy to overcoming stage fright is know how to practice. Practice with a group that you're comfortable with, and try to get in front of that audience as much as possible before the date you have your presentation on. Now, my third technique to overcome stage fright is something that I've been doing for the past 10 years or so. I surround myself with a group of mentors, people who know more than me, people who have done more than me. And what I do is I constantly do my presentations and speeches in front of my mentors. And sometimes when a mentor or a teacher tells you, buddy, your speech is fantastic, your speech is great, I really enjoyed it, and you feel the sense of confidence that someone who knows more than you, someone who is an authority figure, already has given you feedback and has accepted your speech. Now that confidence you can take then to your audience. So those are the 3 techniques that I normally use to overcome stage fright. There is nothing called completely abolishing stage fright. What you need to do is learn how to manage your stage fright. But something I want you to remember, when I was doing my competitive public speaking, another past world champion said, Dananjaya, even if you make a mistake on stage, the audience doesn't want you to fail. Now that's so true. I want you to imagine all of you in an audience, and you see a speaker forgetting a line, you see a speaker forgetting a word, you see a speaker stumbling on stage. None of us in the audience will ever go, hooray, this guy messed up his speech. That's fantastic. He just forgot his speech. It's the best thing that happened in this whole conference. We never do that. whenever we see a speaker struggling on stage, inside of our mind, we are going, man, come on, get that speech. You can get that line. You can finish the speech. We are always rooting for the speaker. So something that all of you must understand is when you get on stage, the audience is not looking to see you fail. Even if you struggle and stumble on stage, the audience is always rooting for you, and the audience wants you to succeed. So the audience is always on your side. So that's something that you can remember. All right, here we go. Next question. All right, questions are streaming in, guys. You got to give me a little bit of time to pick the question. Here we go. All right. Hasita actually, Hasita has asked me, can I pick my own style or be more dramatic on stage? Now, I think I answered this question, Hasita. What I told was, yes, you can pick your own style on stage, but that style needs to be unique to a level that the judges will be attracted to your speaking style. So that's something that you got to remember. You can have your own style, but it may not be attractive to the audience or the judges who are listening to you. So what you need to do is look at successful speakers, look at the different styles, and then start to integrate that into developing a style that is attractive to the audience and the judges. Now, remember, when I talk about uniqueness, uniqueness has a threshold. I always talk about this. Uniqueness has a threshold. See, within this threshold, unique is good. People will love something unique. But if it's too unique, if your uniqueness is something above the threshold of someone's understanding, it just becomes weird. So you need to understand at an international level, and you can do this by studying the past world champions at an international level. What is unique? What's the upper threshold of unique, and what's the lower threshold of unique? And you got to always pitch something in the middle, acceptable, and something that people want to accept. So that's something that that you guys can follow. All right, here we go. Couple of questions. The questions are strolling in. And you guys can send in your questions on Twitter. I'm on Twitter. You guys can send in your questions on Facebook message as well. All right, here we go. Daya from Sri Lanka asked me this question. Daya, how are you doing? One of my good friends joining in. How are you doing, buddy? Daya's asking, I have a habit of performing well in prepared speeches without any practice. But if I do practice a bit more, then I lose control of the flow and timing. How do I overcome this? All right. So Dana is talking about over practice, how not to kill the buzz and the vibe that you have. If you continuously practice on and on and on, you lose that oomph. That's a very tough question that you were asking. So let me answer this question to you in two strategies that I use. Now, I have the same problem. Sometimes when I over practice a speech, I lose the interest in doing it because you overkilled it. What I've identified is, generally for me, I practice the speech at least about 20 to 25 times. Okay. But how I practice the speech is different. Sometimes I just play it in my mind. Sometimes I just practice certain paragraphs. Sometimes I practice the opening, and sometimes I practice the ending. So I break my practice into different sections. For example, I have a story inside my speech. So on Monday, I will just practice the story. On Tuesday, I'll just practice the ending. And on Wednesday, I'll practice my opening. Closer to the competition date, now I start practicing the whole speech in its entirety. So that prevents me from overkilling and over practicing my speech. So this is one strategy that I use in order to avoid over practicing my speech. Now, here's my second strategy. The second strategy that I use is I record my speech. I record the full speech. And what I do is, instead of practicing it, I listen to my own speech and my own voice. And this is a second way that so I'm not literally I'm not practicing over and over and over again, but I've recorded the speech and I'm listening to it. And because I'm listening to it, that internalizes my script. So that's two strategies that you can use in order to prevent overkill. Here we go. Yasas Pereira is asking me, is it important to use props like you did in your winning speech? Yes, props is important. Now, let me tell you why props are important. The visual, when you speak, it's more auditory. It's your voice, right? But when you use props, you bring in a visual element to your speech. Now that's attractive. Anything that the audience can see in addition to what they can hear is exciting. But when you pick a prop, make sure that you don't overdo it. Don't pick props that are too difficult to move around. Don't pick props that are too difficult and too cumbersome to use on stage. Use simple props that have big impact, and that's what I did in terms of a rose. A rose is not a big prop. It's something that I could keep in my pocket, but that visual impact had a massive gain. So what you need to do is, you don't, for example, let's say you're simulating your speech, and you don't need to have a prop for every sentence, for every paragraph. Sometimes I've seen speakers bringing chairs onto the stage, but it doesn't add value to their speech. So whatever prop you use has to add 20 to 30% more value to what you are saying. So if the prop doesn't add value, then don't use it. That's my theory. So I have my script and I ask myself, does my prop add 20 to 30% more value to my speech? And then I say yes, then I would use my prop. So that's something that's yes, you can focus on. Here we go. Okay, here we go. A lot of questions coming in. So here we go. Prasanna Kumar. Prasanna, how are you doing? All the way from India, my friend. All right, here we go. Prasanna asks me this question. Here we go. Does my speech have to be emotional to make it a championship speech? Now, I answered this question a couple of times ago. Prasanna, if you rewind my session, you will find the answer to this question. I've said this is a geographical problem. Depending on where you are in the world, emotions can win or lose a contest. Now, what you need to calibrate your thinking is into, you're doing a contest speech. Now, sometimes you need to adjust your strategy to cater to the market or cater to the judges or the audience that you're doing your speech in. But here's the trick. Sometimes you can counter emotion with humor. Now, this is why I always go ready with two speeches to my contest. I look at the contestants that are going in front of me. And if their speeches, if I know in the semifinal round that their speeches are emotional, what I do is I switch my speech into something which is humorous. Now, this is about your competition and who you're competing with. And this is why it's so important to analyze the contestants that you're with. I can still remember in 2011, there was this contestant that did a very emotional speech. In fact, even I was crying after the speech was over. But guess what? I did my homework and I did my research, and I knew that this contestant was going to go with an emotional speech. What did I do? I developed a humorous speech called The Moonwalk, which was filled with humor. And what it did was it created a contrast between emotion and humor. And when there is a contrast, what happens is, generally, if your humor is really great, the judges want the release of listening to something entertaining immediately gets you good marks. So Prasanna, my tip to you is study your competition. If your main contestant is going with a lot of emotion, get ready with a speech that has a ton of humor. The contrast will get you the marks that you need to win the contest. So that's my advice to you, Prasanna. Here we go. Anupriya from Pune, India. Hi, Anupriya. How are you doing? Now, thank you so much for joining in. Asks me. Here we go. It becomes very difficult for me to keep a smiling face on stage. Laughter doesn't come easily to me during speeches, even if it's a humorous one. Please guide. All right. Anupriya, here's the trick. You don't need to smile at your own humor. Now, this is something that we as Toastmasters are constantly, we constantly talk about. When you make the joke, or when you have your punchline, or when you tell a humorous story, try not to laugh. What I would like you to do is I want you to take a look at my speech. I see something in you. And you would see when the audience is laughing, I'm actually not laughing. I'm actually not smiling. I'm keeping a straight face. And that actually adds to the humor. So your problem could actually be a blessing in disguise. You do not have to smile, laugh out loud at your own jokes. You could make a different facial expression depending on the type of humor that you are using. So that, my friend, could be a tip for you. All right. Here we go. Questions are strolling in. All right, here we go. Kosala from Sri Lanka has asked me this question. Hi, Kosala, how are you doing? All right, here we go. Hold on, why? Okay, give me 1 second. Kosala's question doesn't seem to be popping up. All right, let me dig out another question, guys. Hold on. All right, here we go. Another question coming in. Here we go. I have been a Toastmaster for a while now. However, I have a fear of competing. It's just that the pressure is making me nervous and making me forget everything I studied so far. Any tips on losing the pressure? A true fan and a Toastmaster. All right. The pressure of competing is not allowing you to get on stage. All right. That's understandable. This is why I love being the underdog in contests. I always, when I started my Toastmastering career, I managed to set myself with the right expectations. I said, win or lose, I'm just going to get on stage. And that's the expectation that I set for myself. Sometimes when you're an accomplished Toastmaster, let's say you're a DTM or a CTM or advanced communicator bronze, sometimes you don't want to get on stage because you think that failing will look bad on the qualification or the status or the stature that you build in the Toastmaster movement. Now, this, my friend, is just in your mind. This is just in your mind. Something that I do to overcome the pressure is I go with a mindset to deliver a message. And in an interview that I did with Toastmasters, my podcast, you guys should check that out. I said, this year, I won the contest because I stopped I decided to stop competing. So when I got on stage this year in Kuala Lumpur, my main aim was not to win the contest. This year was 2014 was the year I decided not to compete. I just wanted to go out and just be myself and tell a story that I loved to tell. So I would probably tell you the best way to manage the pressure is to set the right expectations, my friend. Don't put a burden on yourself for winning the contest or winning a speech contest. Just go there to just give a great message and to help the many people that are listening to you. But here's something important. Once you become successful, nobody remembers your failures. Once you become successful, nobody remembers your failures. Nobody asks me, Dananjaya, how many times you failed in Toastmasters. Nobody asks me how many times did you lose speech contest. Nobody actually asks me these questions anymore. So go out there, compete, and give that great message you have to share with the world, and set the right expectations, and this will help you manage your pressure. All right, here we go. Next question coming in. It makes me nervous when I go on a stage, when I go on an unfamiliar setup. Is there any way I can overcome this to perform anytime, anywhere? Okay, Aparna from India. Aparna, hi, how are you doing? All right, here we go. Now I'm going to tell you something crazy. This will sound absolutely crazy, but it works. All right, here we go. Something that gave me confidence was dancing. I love dancing. I was a professional dancer before I actually joined Toastmasters. And I had already learned how to dance in front of an audience. So I was actually dancing in front of 300, 500 people sometimes, four times a week, because when I was young, my dream was to become a professional dancer. Surprisingly, the confidence I got from dancing was the confidence I brought on to the Toastmasters stage. Now, let me rephrase that. The confidence I got from dancing was the confidence that I brought on to the Toastmasters stage. So what I always say is this: if you want to improve your confidence on stage, do things that will improve your confidence off the stage. So for me, it was dancing. For you, it could be something else, Aparna. You could be doing drama. You could be doing theater. You could be doing poetry. Find something that you do in front of an audience outside of Toastmasters, outside of public speaking. And you will see when your confidence blossoms in that area, you can bring that confidence into Toastmasters. So how can you speak anywhere? How could you speak? How could you speak anywhere, anytime? Do things that build confidence off the stage, and you will bring that confidence onto the stage. So that's my answer to you, Aparna. I hope that answered your question. All right, here we go. All right. Janak is asking me a question. Any tips on pitch, pattern, speech rate, and volume? Now, this is very important, especially once again, this is also contextualized to the geography. Your pitch, your rate, your speech pattern all depends on where you're contesting at a district and at an area level. Now, if you're in South Asia, you will probably have to speak at about 160 to 165 words per minute. But once you go to the US or to the West, you generally speak about 145 to 150. Because we speak really fast here in the South Asian continent. But when you go to the West, what happens is, they speak much slower and more deliberately. So how do you make a strategy? Depends on where you're speaking. There are many tips and tricks for vocal variety that's already there in your Toastmasters manual. But you know, something that allows me to practice my vocal variety is I love to imitate different people. Sometimes I do a Morgan Freeman accent. Sometimes I love imitating Al Pacino. Sometimes I love imitating Barack Obama. And whenever I see a speaker that I like, I love to imitate. So what I do is I just go into my personal space and I try to imitate the way people talk. And this allows me to experiment with different ranges of voices, different pitches, different rates of speaking, and this gives me a great strategy to exercise not only my vocal variety, but gives me an arsenal of different voices and different speech patterns when it comes to role plays and speeches inside your speech. So how do you increase your vocal variety? Love imitating people. So that's a strategy that you can probably try out as well. All right, that's for you, Janak. Here we go. Next question, rolling in. Guys, I'm getting a ton of questions here. I'm going to pick and select certain questions that are important. All right. Since you have so many experiences, have you ever experienced any malfunction of audio-visual experiment? How did you handle it? Maxwell Silver. Maxwell, let me tell you, I've been competing in Toastmasters for now over 10 years before I won this contest. Everything that can happen to a speaker on stage has happened to me. And one of those things that happened to me was my mic malfunction in one occasion. On the second occasion, my mic gave off a static feedback for the entire duration of my speech. Now, these are things that happen to speakers. That's how life is, right? But what you need to do is don't react. Don't react. I've seen a lot of speakers get frustrated. They stop their speech. They go off the stage. I would advise you not to do it. What I would advise you to do is, if your mic or audiovisual equipment malfunctions, start speaking from the bottom of your chest. Start getting that gusto, start bringing that oomph into your speech, and speak out loud as much as you can. And I would advise you never to stop a speech in the middle of a malfunction. Generally, for me, a speaker that can handle a malfunction like that is a true champion. That shows that the speaker is ready to handle anything that happens on stage. So there is nothing much you could do in terms of getting back your mic back on. What I did when it happened to me, the first time my audiovisual equipment malfunctioned, was I removed the mic and I started speaking from the bottom of my belly. And surprisingly, I came in second place. So the judges are on your side. Sometimes when a judge actually sees good sportsmanship, sometimes when they see a speaker not giving up, they might actually be on your side, and you might actually get placed, because most of the judges are placed in the front, first to 2 to 3 rows in an audience, just so that they can hear the speaker in case a malfunction happens. So Maxwell, that's my advice to you. All right, here we go, guys. Questions are streaming in. Next question. If I'm competing for the first time and all my other contestants have experiences before competing, I'm experienced in contesting, how do I cope up with the others? There might be a know-it-all who discriminates. Okay, this is Yash Sun from China. Hey, how are you doing, Yash? All the way from China. Thank you so much for joining in. So what you're trying to tell me is, when you get on stage with the experienced speaker, how do you handle it, right? That's what you're saying. All right. Well, Yash, this is a very important question, and a lot of us get intimidated by experienced speakers, and rightfully so, because they have a lot of experiences. But let me tell you, you might have all the experiences in the world, but sometimes the story you have to say and the story you have to tell may be so compelling that you can beat an experienced speaker. Now, if you look at the World Championship of Public Speaking this year, when I got onto the final stage, I was one of the least experienced speakers on the final stage of the World Championship of Public Speaking. Actually, I think there were 4 or 5 contestants who've actually been on the final stage more times than me. But how do I counter this? I use what I have learned. I go deep into speech structuring strategy. I go in deep to speech delivery, and I make sure that I got my basics right. And I have a great, compelling story, and I make sure that I say that story in a way that is unique to counter the experience. So, Yash, to give you some feedback, what I would ask you to do is follow 3 things. Number 1, do confidence building activities off the stage, outside of Toastmasters. You could join a dancing class just like me if you want. That's number 1. So you may not have speaking experience, but you have some experience being in front of a stage. So that's number 1. Number 2, go deep into understanding how to structure and deliver speeches. There are great speeches on YouTube. I would ask you to imitate these styles until you develop your own style. We all learn by imitating. I always say this. How does a child learn to walk? He learns by observing and try to imitate different people. But after a while, he will develop his own style of walking. So what I would ask you to do is look at the strategies other speakers are adapting and experiment. And this will help you build your confidence. Number 3 is something that I've always preached. Surround yourself with a supportive ecosystem. Now, having the right ecosystem around you as a speaker, as a competitive speaker, is one of the probably the most important ingredient in winning your speech. So I would probably tell you, if you do these 3 things, you could overcome the fear that you have, that you're talking about. Experience doesn't necessarily translate into a winning strategy. A winning strategy can always trump experience. And that's my advice to you. All right, let's go on to our next question. Here we go. right, next question coming in. All right. Here we go. Let's get on the next question, guys. Give me a sec until I pull out the next question that's coming. All right. Okay, here we go. Rajiv is asking me this question. In all contests, World Championship of Public Speaking, humorous speeches always works and wins. What do you think? Will serious speeches have the same impact? All right. Out of all the speeches that you can talk about, probably for me, one of the most important thematic speeches are speeches that focus on self-interest. This means, is there a significant take home for the audience? That's your number one priority. Sometimes humorous speeches are able to convey a message more effectively than emotional speeches. Now, humorous speeches and emotional speeches are in two extremes. Now, you need to understand this. If you look at a continuum of good speeches, if you got humorous speeches on one side, emotional speeches on the other side, these are two extremes. In their own, it's not enough to win a world championship. A completely humorous speech won't win a world championship, and a completely emotional speech may not have what it takes to win a world championship. What it needs to have is a balance where more of a sine curve. So sometimes you're humorous and suddenly you become emotional, and sometimes you become humorous again and suddenly you become emotional. Now, if you look at my speech, I see something in you. You will see this contrast. In one sentence, I'm very humorous. After the audience finishes laughing, I immediately go with a deep emotional counter. Now, this creates this humor emotion contrast. Ideally, when you finish, the audience should have laughed and cried within the 7 minutes of your speech. Got it? The audience should have laughed and cried within the 7 minutes of your speech. Now, if you can come up with a speech like that, that to me is a world championship speech. All right, here we go. Next question, rolling in. Next question, rolling in. Here we go. I'm more interested in competing in humorous speeches, but no one laughs at my jokes, or the audience is flat and unengaged. Ramesh from Sri Lanka. Ramesh, all right, brother. I feel you, man. You know, humor is as much as humor has to do with content, it also has to do with the style and confidence in which you use that humor. So Ramesh, sometimes you might have great content, but you might probably want to look at the style that you are using this content in. Sometimes you might have really great content, but you might be telling the joke or the story or the punchline in a way that is a way that signifies a lack of confidence. So just because you have great content, great humorous content, that's just 20%. I would say another 40% would be on the style in which you pitch that humor. And another 40% would be the confidence that you engage the audience with. So sometimes the audience may not be laughing because maybe the style that you pitch it in, maybe that might have a problem, or maybe it's just you're not confident about the joke that you're saying or the humor that you're using. Now, if you can work on these two, you might have a great chance on telling a joke. Yeah. All right. Telling a joke or using humorous content. All right. Here we go. Next question. What are your presentation speech topic? What are your presentation speech topic and practice delivery drills, rituals, contest. Okay. So I think what this message means is, what are my speech topics and practice drills or rituals during a contest, right? Okay, that's Chen from Malaysia. Hi Chen, all the way from Malaysia. How are you guys doing? I'm coming to visit you guys in May. Hopefully I'll get to see you. I have basically 3 rituals that I use when I get ready for the contest. Number 1, I pick a topic that is interesting to the audience. I pick a topic that I love to talk about. I look at this balance. Is it interesting for my audience? Is it something that I want to talk about? How do I know this? It's very simple. Once I write my script, if I can memorize my script in 4 sessions or 4 goes, then I know I have a speech that I love to talk about. Okay? If you find it hard to internalize the speech that you have written, this could mean that you don't have the confidence or you don't have the flow to tackle this topic. So once you write your script, look at how fast you internalize your script. If you can absorb your own script within 4 goes, that's the topic that you should talk about. I always pick topics that I can internalize within 3 practice ones, 3 to 4 practice ones. And then it becomes tremendously easy for me. If I have to labor, if I have to put a ton of effort into memorizing my speech, then I know this speech won't look good or sound good when I actually get on stage. So that's number 1. Number 2, I rehearse in front of kids. I tell this, I've told this before, and I told this in different interviews as well. I visit schools and I visit universities, and I love to practice the content that I'm going to practice in my speech contest in front of kids and young people, because the audience is very genuine in their reaction and response. So it allows me not only to be comfortable, it takes the fear of messing up on stage, because you're talking to kids, and it gives me a lot of confidence to experiment with the topic. So that's my second practice drill that I use. Number 3, my ritual is before the contest night. Now, a lot of Toastmasters who know me know this. I like to insulate myself. So I generally block myself out for the 24 hours before the contest, and I'm all alone. And I like to just think about why I'm doing this. What's the purpose? I like to think about the journey that I came this far. I like to listen to my favorite music. I like to order my favorite meal. I love giving phone calls to people I love to talk about. And for the 24 hours before the contest, I'm just doing things that I love. I'm not surrounding myself with mentors. I'm not surrounding myself with advisors. I'm not surrounding myself with club members that have advice to give me. I just shut myself out, and for 24 hours I'm calm, I'm cool, I'm collected, and I'm getting ready for the battle ahead. And I want to come to that level of calmness, that level of that heart rate, that pulse, that calmness that gives me complete silence in my mind. So those are the 3 things that I love to do before getting on to a speech contest. All right, buddy, here we go. Let's go to that next question. Here we go. Next question is coming up. Here we go. All righty. Just searching for the right questions. Give me 1 second till I pull this up. All righty. Let me get the next question up. Hold on. A lot of questions coming in. You guys can tweet in your questions. My Twitter address is Dananjaya_H. So please tweet in your questions. Here we go. When I'm competing, what if there is another contestant who has structured his or speech under the same subject or something similar? Will I get disqualified, or is it okay? Hi, Farah from Kuwait. That's a very interesting scenario. Farah, nice to touch base. And I was in Kuwait with you guys a couple of months ago, and I had a great time. You won't get disqualified. Now, this is a very interesting, very important question. There are two ways that you can get disqualified from a contest. Number one is obviously if you jump over limit. Number two is someone contests your originality. Now, I told you, everything that can happen to a speaker has happened to me. And I can remember in 2010, my speech got contested for originality. But not because I spoke under a similar theme, but someone thought actually I had plagiarized the speech. And the judges actually voted in my favor, and they said the speech was original. But in your case, Farah, what you're asking is if your theme is similar to what another speaker is talking about, you can't get disqualified. Unless your speech, unless a significant portion of what the other person is saying and what you are saying is exactly the same, you cannot get disqualified. So to answer your question, spot on, you can talk about the same thematic area. So for example, you want to talk about, let's say, not giving up, and the other speaker also talks about not giving up. Now the themes are the same. Though the themes are the same, your topics will be different. The message will be different. And the stories you tell will be different. So therefore, there is no way that you can get disqualified unless the topics are the same, the stories are the same, and your message is also the same. Then yes, but you might get disqualified. That's highly unlikely. So look at these three areas: change the topic, change the stories, and change the message. But the theme can be the same. Theme is about not giving up. So Farah, that's the question that I've got for you. That's the answer that I've got for you, and I hope I answered that. Here we go.